Former Dragon Age writer calls out, quote, anti-fans who bet on games failing before launch. More and more fandoms are making the things that they're fans of integral to their identity. And if it's integral to their identity, anything that affects it or insults it insults them, he said. Honestly, guys, for as long as I've been doing this, I think this is probably one of the stupidest critiques I've ever seen come out of one of these articles. I think it's beyond ridiculous and hypocritical that this article accuses gamers of making angry culture war comments when developers are inserting entire plot lines centered around gender identity in already well-established series. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hardlight Network. Alrighty guys, today we are covering one of the most baffling sentiments that I've ever seen come out of the games industry, and honestly its source is also just as confusing. It's no secret to anyone that over the last few years the AAA games industry has been rapidly spiraling downwards. Apart from pushing the same copy and paste slop, when developers' new ideas fall on their face, they can only resort to putting a fresh coat of paint on an old game, pushing out a remaster, and hoping to cash in on the nostalgia of their rapidly dwindling fanbase. Of course, instead of accepting responsibility when these games flop and going back to the drawing board to reflect on what brought them their previous successes, these developers are constantly looking for a new boogeyman on which to blame their failures. So it's no surprise that recently a lot of these same developers have been turning the blame on their own fanbase. You see, it's not actually their fault when these games suck. It's yours. Because instead of being a good little gamer and sucking up whatever slop they push out, you take to Reddit to complain and prey on their downfall. At least, that's what David Gaider seems to think in this article we're going to be covering today. But of course, before we get into this video today, guys, do me a solid and hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content that I've got coming up for you guys in the future, and also leave a comment down below to tell me which game you want to see fail next. Also, if you are so inclined to support this channel further, there are super thanks and memberships options down below. Feel free to join the channel today for access to exclusive content and perks that you can't get anywhere else. But without any further ado, let's get into today's article. Today's reading comes to us from PC Gamer and is entitled, "They're Very Determined, Suddenly, to See Your Game Fail." Former Dragon Age writer calls out, quote, anti-fans who bet on games failing before launch. Former BioWare writer David Gaider, who worked on the likes of Baldur's Gate 2, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and the first 3 Dragon Age games, not including Veilguard, recently spoke out about an issue he dubbed anti-fans in an interview with Games Radar. We've seen it happen time and time again. A subset of players and content creators catch wind of some detail they don't like in a project and make it a personal mission to spend the lead up to launch bashing the game as much as humanly possible. Sometimes they'll claim victory with sales flops like Concord or Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and otherwise pretend like nothing ever happened when a targeted game reviews and sells well, like Assassin's Creed Shadows. Quote, "The difficulty is if, suddenly, you end up with anti-fans. Then they turn from what you want. Fans who would go out to spread the word of your game and get people interested," said Gaider. But if you get anti-fans, they sort of do the opposite. They're very determined, suddenly, to see your game fail as a sort of lesson to others who would make games of the same type, right? And that, honestly, these days, there's some element of that present in almost all fandoms, but it's always sort of been there for RPGs in particular. Gaider went on to explain how he's seen, quote, fandom culture exacerbate this problem. Quote, "More and more fandoms are making the things that they're fans of integral to their identity. And if it's integral to their identity, anything that affects it or insults it insults them," he said. So they are so invested in making it what they imagine that, like I said, if they turn into the anti-fan, suddenly it's their personal investment in seeing that fail, or seeing the developers who made that decision be punished.
Projection!
According to Gator, this type of hostility is pushing a lot of game developers to minimize their public presence. Unfortunately, the media and cultural environment that produces this behavior doesn't seem likely to change anytime soon. We're even already gearing up for our next Flashpoint. Alongside genuine concerns about Marathon's genre shift from Destiny and well-earned criticism of Bungie plagiarizing from the artist Anti-Real, a subset of players appears to have become invested in it failing financially in the mean-spirited way Gator described. And honestly guys, for as long as I've been doing this, I think this is probably one of the stupidest critiques I've ever seen come out of one of these articles. Why is David Gator acting like he's some sort of victim in an abusive relationship? This isn't some Jekyll and Hyde scenario where your dedicated and loyal fan base is suddenly turning into monsters and trashing your game. When gamers complain about these projects, they're not trying to sabotage your success, and they don't want to see your games fail. It's actually the exact opposite. They want your game to be better. And it's absolutely wild to me that this is coming from one of the guys who wrote some of the best storylines for some of the greatest games I've ever played. All of the former games that he worked on, like Baldur's Gate 2, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and the first 3 Dragon Age games, all still hold up despite their dated technology. They were and are amazing titles, and it's because these games were so good that people have such harsh criticisms for trash like the Veilguard. I mean, just looking at Dragon Age as an example, is it really so difficult to believe that people who have been fans of this series for over 15 years would be upset when they went from this to this?
When I see my child in danger, I act.
Here's the ginger.
Thank you.
So, I'm non-binary.
What does that mean?
It means I don't feel like a man or a woman.
These two clips are like night and day, and that one scene from the Battle of Ostrogoth carries with it more emotional weight than the entire conversation from that scene in Veilguard. I think it's beyond ridiculous and hypocritical that this article accuses gamers of making angry culture war comments when developers are inserting entire plot lines centered around gender identity in already well-established series. I think if developers really believed these topics were valid and worth exploring, then they wouldn't have to hijack popular franchises just to insert these talking points. But as it stands right now, it seems like it's just easier for these developers to tank the entire legacy of a franchise by ham-fistedly smashing in these subjects. Not only are they damaging potential future goodwill towards independent projects that could explore these topics on their own merit, but the worst part is they're alienating their already established audience just to do it. On top of that, they feel the need to double and triple down on these bad decisions by blaming and insulting gamers for not wanting to be harassed with progressive politics by proxy. But that's going to do it for this video today, guys. Thank you so much to everybody who has watched up to this point. If you can, before you head out, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content that I've got coming up for you guys in the future. Also, don't forget to take to the comment section down below with your thoughts on this issue. At this point, I've pretty much written off AAA gaming as any serious attempt to advance the medium. It's pretty obvious to see that it's been hijacked for political interests, and they've got no interest in actually providing what gamers want. In our next video, we're going to go a little more in depth on how the CEOs of these companies actually feel about gamers, and spoiler alert, it's exactly how you think. Thankfully, I've got a pretty decent catalog of older games that are actually fun to play and don't make me feel like I'm sitting through a freshman poli-sci course. That being said, I've got to get back to the old grind, so as always, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.